I was in a car accident last week. I was T-boned crossing a four-way stop and my car was completely totaled. Luckily, I only walked away with a few scratches and bruises, but nothing too serious. The guy who crashed into me was driving drunk and had no insurance, so he was arrested and my insurance company is replacing my car for me. It sucks because I won't be able to find another good priced car since the used car market prices are way too high right now. It's going to take a few weeks to fully resolve the issue, so for now I'll have to take the city bus to and from work. I've ridden the bus plenty of times growing up, so I already know the routes and times the local bus passes at. It shouldn't be too bad, but things might have changed in the last several years, so I'm just hoping for regular transportation so I don't have to miss work days. I'm getting off of work in a few hours and was telling my coworker about my car accident when he offered to give me a ride home. I was delighted and accepted the offer. We both get off at the same time, so it shouldn't be too much of a hassle. I offered to pay his gas, but he told me don't worry about it, that he lived just a few miles from my house anyways. We passed by a Chinese restaurant on the way home and decided to buy some food to go so I can have something to eat later for dinner since it was already getting late and I was quite tired from a long day at work. I got home and freshened up. I changed my cat's food and water along with switched out the kitty litter since it had been 2 days without cleaning it out. It was starting to smell rather rancid as you got close. My cat is very temperamental. Some days she just wakes up and she's a sweetheart asking for non-stop rubs, while other days she keeps her distance and just stares at me from across the room. I always wonder what she's thinking while she stares at me for hours on end. I began to get ready for bed since I had to be at the bus stop 15 minutes before it arrived. I didn't want to risk missing it, and it was far cheaper than having to pay an Uber to get to work. An Uber will cost me around $30 each way with today's gas prices. Meanwhile, the bus is just $2.50. As I sat at the bus stop, another man walked down the road and stood behind me waiting for the morning bus. I was watching morning news stories on my phone, so I hadn't even looked at the man as he stood behind me, leaning on the gate behind. I could see the bus arriving down the street. It was stuck at the red light. Meanwhile, I stood up and waved at the bus to make sure he wouldn't skip my stop. I got on the bus as I gathered my cash to pay the bus fare. I could hear the man standing behind me waiting for his turn to pay the fare while he stood on the steps of the bus. It was rather empty this morning. It seems the bus just began its route and was barely starting to pick up customers. The bus driver sipped his coffee as he drove off. I walked a few steps and sat down on the bench seat. I put my bag to my side as I could feel the man sit in the road directly behind me. There was nobody on the bus, so I don't know why this man was sitting so close to me as I put my headphones in my ears and listened to a conference call I was supposed to finish last night but ended up falling asleep. About 5 minutes into my audio, I hear a whisper in my ear from the man behind me. I wasn't completely sure if he was talking to me or if it was just background noise since I had my headphones on. Once again, I hear a mumble in my ear and knew for sure it was the man sitting behind me trying to talk to me. I removed my earphone and slightly tilted my head as to hear what the man was telling me. Once again, he leaned up and whispered in my ear. I couldn't believe what I heard him say. He had whispered in my ear, "I wish you would have died." I freaked out and said, "Excuse me?" as I grabbed my purse, standing up to move to another seat. I looked back and the man had a large wound on his face covered halfway with a bandage. I instantly recognized this was the man who crashed into my car, and he looked angry while he stared at me, clenching his lips and fists. I sat right next to the bus driver as the man sat in the middle of the bus just staring at me, making hand gestures towards me. I could feel my heart racing faster and faster. I can't believe, out of all the people, the drunk man who almost killed me was the only person on the bus with me besides the driver. Now he knows my route and might even know where I live. I didn't know what to do. I was beginning to panic as all types of thoughts ran through my head. I thought about getting off the bus now and calling an Uber, but I was scared the man might follow me off the exit while I stood on some random road at 6 in the morning. I figured the bus has cameras, and the bus driver is by my side, so if the crazy drunk guy attempts to do anything, I would be somewhat safe since I'm not alone. I don't know the man, is still in jail after being caught drunk and almost killing someone, but I guess that's how the system around here works. As long as you pay your fees, they release you. The man began shouting from the middle of the bus. I think he was drunk again, as he slurred his words and kept pointing his middle finger at me. I wasn't looking at him, but could see him from the side of my eye as he slowly moved closer and closer to my seat while mumbling angry gibberish at me. He was probably mad at me for calling the police after the car accident, which ended up in his arrest. But what else was I supposed to do? Just let him walk away while I took all the responsibility for his actions? I could finally see my work building ahead. I was relieved to know I was getting off the bus in front of my job and could see several of my coworkers outside smoking cigarettes before their shift began. The rest of the day went by fine. My coworker walked to me and asked if I needed another ride home, which I smiled and said, "Oh, thank you, that would be great." Later that day, we both clocked out and he drove me home, dropping me off near the side entrance of my apartment building. As I got off the car, I thanked my coworker for the ride. He said no problem and drove off towards his house. I went to my entrance gate and swiped my key card. As I walked in, I grabbed my backpack off the floor and heard someone behind me say, "This isn't over." I didn't know if they were talking to me or someone was on the phone. As I looked back, there he was again. The drunk man from the bus was sitting across the street of my apartment on the sidewalk, drinking a beer while staring at me. My eyes grew wide open in fear. The man knew where I lived, as he laughed and pointed his middle finger at me again. I called 911 and explained the situation, but they said as long as he's not committing any crimes, there was nothing they can do, that he was free to be anywhere he wanted in public. They said if he enters my building to give them a call and they can have him trespassed. I'm freaking out now. Why is this man following me? Why is he threatening me? I never did nothing. I didn't cause him to crash into me, as he was the one driving drunk that run right through the stop sign. I went into my apartment and could still see the man sitting out front my building drinking his beer. I showered up and got ready for a night conference call I usually listen to every evening. That's when a screwdriver broke through my window on the second floor as I jumped in fear when it made the loud bang as the window glass shattered all over the floor. I stood up and looked out the window and couldn't see anyone out there. The man was gone. He must have ran away after breaking my window. Now to think of it, I feel he wanted to harm me. Why was he waiting outside my apartment with a screwdriver? I called my insurance and told them I can't wait any longer for my transportation as an emergency had come up, not wanting to give specific details to the agent. They said they would pay half the rental charge for a vehicle if I decided to rent one. I instantly called an Uber and drove to my local car rental agency and picked up a rental car. I will no longer be riding the bus and hope to never run into this man again. The school year is coming to an end. Everyone is bringing large poster boards and flowers while the guys ask their crushes to prom, which is just in a few weeks. The line of yellow school buses were lined up out the parking lot as one by one they dropped off students at our school. We live in the countryside, so most of the students come to school on the bus, since some live quite far away and their parents are already at work. The bus is free and picks us up in front of our house and also drops us back off at home after school. It takes my bus about 1 hour to drop me off at home, since it has to make stops at everyone's house one by one. The bus drivers are a bunch of angry old ladies and men. They usually just drive silently, shouting at the kids that are getting too loud while they stare through the rearview mirror. If any of us get in trouble, we can lose the privilege of bus transportation, so we all try and behave our best on the bus so our parents don't have to drop us off in the morning and be late to work. My bus driver is Betty. She's not as bad as the rest of the drivers. She was a retired school teacher when she decided to begin driving the bus as a volunteer to help kids out and keep her days busy in retirement. The school day went by like any other day of school. I start the day with math class and end it with physical education. Today was Friday, so we had to run 1 mile under 12 minutes. I hate Friday runs, since the evening sun is usually the hottest when it's our time for physical education class. I could see all the bus drivers arriving in the parking lot since school was about to finish in the next 20 minutes. I didn't have the courage to ask my date for prom today, so I figured I would take the evening to build up the courage and ask her tomorrow. I'm not going to make one of those cheesy signs and will simply ask her in person during our science class, since she sits just 2 chairs next to me. The next day had arrived and my next class was science. I could feel my heart racing and my palms sweating as I had to build up the courage to ask my crush to prom. To my surprise, she smiled in delight and said that she would love to be my prom date. I was super excited. It felt like a pile of bricks was removed off my shoulders as I thought to myself, that wasn't too bad. It could have been worse if she said no and embarrassed me in front of everyone. Her name is Jenny. She's in the same grade as me, and we started talking in middle school a few years back. She would greet me with a hug and say goodbye as we passed each other in the hallways of school. Later that day, I stood outside waiting for my school bus to pull up to pickup area as I could see Jenny waving goodbye to me from the bus window as her bus was already leaving the parking lot. I smiled and blew her a kiss as she laughed. I turned bright red. I don't know why I blew her a kiss. It was just an instant reaction I had. I began to think maybe I liked her more than I thought, but we'll see what happens after prom. If everything goes well, we can start a relationship. I hopped on the bus and greeted our driver Betty as she asked how was school today. I smiled and told her it was great, that I finally built the courage to ask my crush to prom. In delight she said, "That's wonderful, I'm glad you're excited for prom." I walked to the back of the bus and found my seat. The bus was full of kids and all the seats were taken, so we had to place our backpacks in the storage above our heads. All of us were ready as Betty shut the door to the bus and announced we were now heading off to our first drop-off. We dropped off a few students, and only about half of us were left. The bus left the house and hopped on the highway for 10 minutes to arrive at our next drop-off. Everything was normal. I could hear the bus engine roaring behind me as I daydreamed about how prom would go now that I finally have a date. We were driving down the highway when I could hear the engine getting louder and louder. I looked up ahead and noticed the bus was gaining speed little by little. Students began speaking loud as they all too noticed the bus was going faster and faster. Our bus driver usually stay in the right lanes and drive quite slow, but the bus was going faster than usual at this moment. I noticed the bus began to swerve out of its lane as the speed bumps made noise while the tires ran them over. I stood up to look at Betty to see if everything was okay, why the bus was driving so fast, and I could see our driver was having a heart attack. Betty had blacked out, and she was hunched over in her seat. I could hear the scream of other kids as the bus went full speed ahead. There was a turn in the distance, and if the bus didn't make the turn, we would drive right through the side railing down the hill, which would be instant death for all of us on the bus. At this moment, one of the kids began shouting, "The bus driver is dead! Someone do something!" The turn was coming closer and closer as the bus was now driving around 80 miles per hour. There was no one controlling the bus and the driver's foot was still on the gas pedal as I heard the engine giving it all the power it's got. I tried to run through the middle aisle as I tripped over a student's backpack that had fallen from the storage above. I could see us right about to hit the railing when I see Betty the driver fall out of her seat and fall down the stairs of the bus. In a quick movement, one of the young girls near the front of the bus jumped out of her seat when she saw Betty fall over. She jumped into the driver's seat of the bus. She couldn't reach the brake pedal, so she grabbed the wheel and at the last second turned the steering wheel to the left, making the bus skid across the entire side rail as I could hear the scratching noise run down the entire side of the bus. The girl had just saved our lives. She sat in the driver's seat as the bus slowly came to a halt on the highway. Students called 911 as the highway patrol arrived within minutes. Another student was on the phone with 911 when I could hear them shouting, "We needed an ambulance. Our bus driver had just passed out and she had fallen over on the bus while we were driving." Luckily, nobody on the bus was seriously injured, but our driver Betty unfortunately didn't make it. Betty's blood pressure had dropped so far causing cardiac arrest. By the time they managed to get her to the hospital, she was pronounced dead on scene. We went back to school a few days later. There were news stations all outside and I could see them all interviewing the students on the bus. The girl who grabbed the steering wheel and saved us all was being interviewed by the largest local news station, and the governor of the state was here too. I could see them hand her what they said, the key to the city for her swift and brave actions.